Droughts can be a serious issue in agriculture, gardening, farming, whatever your context may be. However, I believe that cover crops can help out immensely with helping to prevent many of these negative impacts of drought. And in this video, I'm going to go through ideas as to why this may be the case. The first benefit of using cover crops when we want to make the landscape more drought resilient is that these cover crops have an ability to help shade the soil. So all that leaf cover is helping to absorb and to reflect a lot of that heat energy coming in from the sun that would otherwise potentially bake the soil or dry it out. So these cover crops are helping to cool the soil, and the water loss is coming through transpiration with a bunch of added benefits without just straight up evaporation directly from the soil without any other benefits. The second benefit of the cover crops is that they build organic matter, right? We have the detritus, the above ground biomass, and the below ground biomass, right, with the roots. But then we also have the photosynthates and the root exudates that are produced in the plants and released out into the soil to feed that microbiome, right, and to help improve the soil structure, right? Because a lot of these microbes in the soil are fed from the plants and help to increase the aggregate structure and the soil stability. And the increased organic matter provides a better habitat for these microbes and for these plants to be able to function in that soil. And when you have more total organic matter, you have a much higher water holding capacity, so that when it does rain, you're able to collect more of that water and you're able to hold on to it for a longer amount of time. Thirdly, we're also preventing and buffering wind and water erosion. That above ground biomass of the cover crop helps to buffer or deflect some of the wind closer to the soil, helping to slow down that drying process of the soil and helping to hold more soil particles in place rather than getting blown away. We also have the increase of organic matter and the root channels that are carved by these cover crops to help reduce water erosion as well, right? If we can get more water into the soil and down into deeper depths of the soil without just having it run off near the surface, then we're holding onto more of that water. And with the increased soil structure, the more organic matter and the aggregates and the pore spaces, that soil will be a lot more able to hold itself together and stay in place even when we get some of those heavy rains. Because otherwise, if we have soil that we're just growing a single crop in, or even if it's just bare soil, or like bare soil over the winter time, or it's not being planted during the summertime, then that area is just subject to wind and water erosion. And with that, we're going to lose a bunch of organic matter because there's no life there, or a very minimal amount of it. Fourthly, we have the soil microbiome and the ecological benefits. So when we increase organic matter, we are creating a better habitat, more of a habitat for microbes, right? Because they have more access to water, they have more access to air with the better soil structure and the increased aggregate structure. And that soil microbiome, those microbes, the fungi, the bacteria, will make the nutrients more available to the plants and make the plants stronger and healthier, help them to grow deeper, far-reaching and more extensive root systems that can better find water in the landscape, especially in the deeper depths of the soil. Also, when you have healthier plants entering into a drought situation, they have the ability to respond better than plants that are already stressed with malnutrition. And even when the soil becomes drier, those microbes can still work with the plants and provide nutrients during times of stress to make the crops more drought resilient. And then we also have the ecological support, right, for other aspects, beneficial insects and such, right, that can feed on the cover crop, or like the pollinators, or insects that feed off the nectar, right? So even during these times of drought, we can be supporting this life to make the overall landscape still more resilient, right? So that we have some natural insect predators and not just certain types of pests that might otherwise wreak havoc on a crop, even on a good day when you don't have those drought conditions. And those beneficial insects have a better habitat, right? They have also, they have that nectar, but they also have that shade that a lot of them will use, right? They'll hide out on the underside of leaves sometimes, right? And so they have more shelter during that drought as well. So you can still get a lot of those benefits even during times of drought. 5 on the list, we also have an increased water holding capacity, right, where we can increase the soil's ability to take in that water, right, for that water to penetrate down into the soil profile and for it to percolate down through the soil profile. Because of that soil pore space, the aggregate structure, the increase in organic matter, it's like a sponge, right, holding onto that water. Also, we have that above ground biomass and increased density of that, especially with how densely we seed that cover crop, or if we're intercropping into a cash crop or a vegetable crop. That increased above ground biomass might help to kind of slow down the rain a little bit, decrease the physical impact of that rain hitting the soil, especially if we get any of those like heavy rains, because that may otherwise decrease the ability for gas exchange between the soil and the air. Then we also have those root channels from that cover crop to be able to better have that water infiltrate and percolate down into the soil profile. And of course, all of that organic matter, the biomass, of the plants that they generate once it decomposes, also the exudates and the photosynthetes that they produce, and the microbes that they feed, and the metabolites that the microbes produce, all generates a bunch of organic matter. And with that, of course, you have a better water holding capacity. So then we also have different carbon to nitrogen ratios, right? If we grow corn or sorghum, their biomass at the end of the season are going to tend to have a higher carbon ratio than to nitrogen, right? So they're going to take a lot longer to biodegrade in the soil and to turn into more usable organic matter. Whereas we have other crops like different forbs or broadleaves, especially you talk about different types of legumes, different types of vetch, beans, or whatever legume you use, those are going to tend to have a higher nitrogen ratio, right? That ratio is going to be narrower. It's going to be a lot more close. And so those will biodegrade faster. So it's cool if you can get the best of both worlds, right? If you mix some of your cover crops, right? You get some of the deep rooted benefits of the sorghum, where its roots can go deep into the soil profile, helping to break up some compaction, carving these channels, adding organic matter to deeper depths. But then you also have some of these forbs, some of these, or specifically legumes, that are helping to break down a lot of this detritus at a faster rate, so that we can generate more organic matter more quickly to more effectively and more efficiently react with the water, interact with the water that it's being exposed to, so that we can better collect and hold water on that landscape sooner. And we have different types of cover crops, right? Some that can be grown over the winter time, depending on your climate, and others that can be grown better during the summertime, during the growing season. And in regenerative agriculture and similar agricultural modalities, there's a lot of emphasis on covering the soil as much as possible and having living roots in the soil, basically almost at all times. And yeah, some of these cover crops will use water, right? They will use some water. Certain cover crops may use more water than others, but how they interact with that water and what they produce from that water, to me, far outweigh any cons of not using cover crops. Because yeah, you're getting transpiration, so you're getting water loss from that, but you're also getting benefits of more organic matter, more shade, more habitat for surrounding ecology, etc., etc. You don't just have bare soil or a sparsely planted monoculture crop where soil evaporation could predominate a lot more. And then you're getting water loss, but you're not building organic matter as much or at all. In certain climates, water can accrue a lot during the winter time, right? Because we have more snow melt. We have snow and ice holding that water on the landscape during the winter time, and as it melts, in many cases, that water will have a greater chance to melt down into the soil and moisten it at deeper depths, as opposed to when it just rains during the summer, and then maybe it rains really hard or just rains and you have a lot more runoff off from the soil surface, and you're not getting that soil that's penetrating as deeply down into the soil, because the water might just be coming in too fast. So we can use this to our benefit, right? We can grow cover crops during the wintertime, and we can also grow cover crops during the summertime, during the growing season. And even some people will interplant cover crops with their regular crops, right? Their vegetable produce crops or cash crops, to make the whole environment more resilient, right? I do that, like combining the garlic and winter rye, or companion planting sorghum with some other crops, right? Like peppers or tomatoes or Ethiopian eggplant this year, right? And then I also use some mulch too to help further buffer that soil from the elements, and to create more of a habitat for different insects like ground beetles, or different arachnids like spiders, that give their own benefits of pest control. We can also have living pathways where we're growing certain types of cover crops, or grasses or whatever, and then we can periodically mow them down the pathways or the aisles into the garden beds, where we are able to provide better habitat in between the planting beds or aisles or whatever. And then we're also increasing the fertility, nutrient access, and buffering shelter for the crops that we grow as well. Or I've also interplanted buckwheat with sorghum and beans and cucumbers, because buckwheat can provide really great habitat for a bunch of beneficial insects like the tachinid fly or trichogramma, etc., soldier beetles. And it also may help to work with certain microbes to make phosphorus more bioavailable, either while it's growing or once that plant matter is breaking down in the soil profile. And overall, sometimes my garden, my growing space may look a little overgrown, right? There's a lot of plants, a lot of life happening in that area. And when we hit drought conditions, I find that a lot of areas of my garden that are like that tend to be greener and not as wilty for a longer period of time as we get deeper into droughty conditions, as opposed to neighbors who, their lawns may just dry out, the patches turn brown during the season, or even different farms nearby where the corn leaves will start to curl and fold when the drought conditions hit. But a lot of plants in my garden are healthy and happy. Of course, there are biological limits, especially earlier in the season before the root system gets fully developed, and if they're just transplanted out. I know sometimes there can be a little hesitancy to plant a cover crop during the wintertime because of the water it might take up during that time, or during the growing season, especially if we're alley cropping it or intercropping it, because of the water it may take up. But to me, the benefits far outweigh any of the cons, because overall we're making that ecosystem a lot more resilient. We're, by building that organic matter, creating a better habitat for beneficial insects and microbes, and we are improving the soil's ability to capture more water, carry it down into deeper depths of the soil profile, and hold on to it for a longer amount of time. And that is how nature works oftentimes in a polyculture. We have different types of plants working together, different microbial communities that they support. Thank you for checking out this video on how cover crops can benefit or mitigate some of the negative impacts of drought. And if you have any ideas or opinions on cover crops and how they may interact with droughts, feel free to share down in the comments. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.